So good morning to everybody. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity. I want to thank Greg for his passion and leadership for Hope Worldwide and for Canada. And I will say this: I've been in this new role as Chief Evangelist for 6 months, and the first person to reach out to me in terms of me working with Hope Worldwide was Greg. And I'm not sure if Greg knew this or not, but he reached out to me, and I was excited to. It was like my first engagement with Hope Worldwide, and it ended up being with such a conscientious and compassionate person. So I'm very grateful to be able to be here with you guys this morning. And just a little bit of a background. I want to talk about how we journey together. Um, I spent 26 years actually in the full-time ministry. I became a disciple back in 1993, and after 11 months of being a disciple, my wife and I were asked to go into ministry. So we started leading in Atlanta. That's the only place we've ever been, back in January 1st, 1995. And in midway between that year, I had the opportunity to go to South Africa for a global missions trip. We were in Johannesburg, and I remember on one of the days going down to Soweto, and this was, somewhat right after apartheid, and there was still separation across Johannesburg, and Soweto was, very poor. I saw this one only white gentleman walking around working with so many people, and I asked somebody, "Who is that?" And they said, "Well, that's Dr. Mark Ottenweiler." And I go, "Well, what does he do? Where is he from?" They said, "Well, he's from Atlanta." And so I thought he was actually from Atlanta and on the trip with us. And then someone said, "No, he and his wife and all of his family live here in Africa, and they work with Hope and they serve the poor." And then later on, during one of the conference sessions, the award was given to Nelson Mandela on behalf of Hope. And so I went back to Atlanta as a young minister, and I said, "What is this Hope Worldwide?" And then I also met Doug Jacoby during that trip, and he taught a class. So I came back with this desire to go to seminary, and with this desire to serve with this organization called Hope. And I didn't realize at the time that it was connected to our church the way it was. And so I began to serve with Hope, and loved it. And it was the thing that really drew me into the life of Jesus Christ. I was certainly sharing my faith, studying my Bible with people, and I baptized my neighbor, my barber, my wife, and another good friend early on as a disciple. But it was my work in the housing projects of Atlanta, some might say the hood, with Hope Worldwide, and we began the Saturday Academy and reaching out to children who were impoverished and helping them to get educated, and then started, addressing food insecurity. Then later on, as I stayed with Hope, I would personally get an interest in prison ministry. And so in our church in Atlanta, Bridgepoint Church, we started engaging in having persons with Hope go inside and outside of some of the toughest prisons in Atlanta. And so for 26 years, I've always journeyed with Hope Worldwide while simultaneously, leading a church in Atlanta. We're fortunate enough at Bridgepoint Church in Atlanta, Georgia, to have a church building. We've been blessed. It's a large church building. It has two sanctuaries. It has a cafeteria. It has office space, administrative space. And so if you was to walk into our building, there would be a part where there's administration, there's a sanctuary, there's conference rooms, and then there's one part, we have a gymnasium, and we have children's classes. Then we also have additional classrooms where we basically took part of our church building and created a Hope space. And so we actually have a Hope office inside our church building. And we have a Hope staff that is a chapter director. None of these are full time. Some community advocates, some service coordinators. That are maybe 10 to 12 people. We invest in these people to go to the conferences. Our church actually sets aside a part of our budget to do Hope work within our church. And so I just wanted to share that on a personal note as I begin to talk about kind of how do we journey together. And one of the things I've noticed since being with Hope for 6 months as an employee and as chief evangelist is the question whether it's Canada or parts of the United States, the Southeast, the West Coast, and this is different from all churches. Some churches and chapters are aligned and they journey together, they walk together. Um, their calendar resonate with one another. Their mission is blended in. Even in Atlanta, at the church where I was leading and am now a member, our church is spread across Atlanta, really non-geographic. It's about 450 people, and we live in about 40 different zip codes in metropolitan Atlanta. And so our church is organized into small groups, and every one of our small groups in our church actually has a small group leader, but they also have a hope, we call them service representative within each one of these groups. And so we have 26 small groups spread across Atlanta, and there is a person, a hope person, intentionally put in each one of these small groups to make sure that we are doing life together in terms of fellowship, in terms of prayer, in terms of breaking bread in our homes, in terms of enjoying the favor of one another. And so part of that is each one of these reps there to make sure that the group itself is able to do service in the various communities and different projects. So we could literally have 26 different small hope projects going on all across Atlanta at any given time. And so we've tried to structure our church in a way that the church and hope can literally, journey together. I put here, this verse in Amos, the three versions, they all mean the same, but I like reading different versions of them. Do two walk together unless they've agreed to do so? Is a good question. And I will say, I believe within the ICOC fellowship in general, which really birthed Hope Worldwide, and that there's been times where Hope Worldwide and the International Church of Christ have really journeyed together almost in this enmeshed relationship that has been beneficial for the two. There's been times where it's been a little bit separated, but I think right now, we have decided that we're going to journey together and try to do great things for the Lord all across the world. This year, if you guys aren't aware already, that this will be the 30th anniversary of Hope Worldwide, and that we'll be celebrating throughout the year, particularly as we go into the fall. So, put some of those things on your calendar. You'll hear more from Hope Corporate about all the different ways over the various next 9 months. We'll talk about how to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Hope Worldwide. And so right now, we're trying to figure out how do we, as Hope and ICOC and all of our churches and chapters, journey together so that we can bring glory to God. One of the ways of doing that is expressing, and this term BHAG, we have a big, hopeful, audacious goal, but it comes from Jim Collins, and there's a book, Built to Last, and I think even Good to Great might even explore some of that if you've read those books. But theirs is a big, hairy, audacious goal, hairy in terms of really intimidating and scary, but we say big, hopeful, audacious goal. And so if you don't remember anything else I say today, try to remember this so that you can really begin to communicate this, to your chapters and members of your churches, that we say that every member engaged in every engagement transforming. And what we mean by this in terms of member, we're talking about the members that we have that are volunteers with Hope, but also the members, and a lot of times these are the same people. So they're synonymous, the members of our churches, that if somehow we can help every member in our church be engaged in the service of the poor. And in some cases, these every members are not just members of our churches, they're also our friends that we bring along to serve with us. Other constituents, the people that spend time with us. I know at Bridgepoint Church in Atlanta, we have people that serve with us with Hope Worldwide routinely that are not actually members of our church. But they do come out and join us, and they bring their family and friend as well. So we would include all those people as members. So if every member can be really engaged. And engaged means that we might come together on multiple touch points. So we might have a touch point at church, a touch point at Hope, one at work, one in community. But the more we can have means we're more engaged. And we're trying to get people to think conscientiously and seriously about, serving the poor. And that every time we come together, every engagement, and that could be a lot of different things. It could be, we do something in the summer in Atlanta where we have a children's camp that we focus holistically on, physical training, emotional intelligence, spiritual connection, relational connection. And so that would be an engagement for us, at our church. And all the different chapters all across North America have different engagements. But for every engagement, every time we come together, for it to be one that is transforming. And so, and that's transforming for our beneficiaries, the people that we are serving, but also is transforming for those who are serving people as well. And that there's this mutuality that when we go to serve people in the name of Jesus and trying to do the holistic ministry of Jesus, that transformation is taking place. And so I want to take a few moments and just kind of focus in a little bit on this idea of transformation biblically, and what it may look like for us, and what the goal could possibly be. So just a little Bible stuff here. In Greek, there's a word that is used for transformation, and it's pronounced metamorpho. And if it sounds familiar, it's like metamorphosis, where we get our English word. And it simply means to change, or transfigure, or to be transformed. And so when we say every member engaged in every engagement transforming, I want us to really think about when we come together to do things, there should be some change that is taking place. It might be small, it might be incremental, but every time we come together and serve, or be the body of Christ, or be servants for Hope Worldwide, that there is some type of transformation that is taking place. And I like to look at like the transfiguration of Jesus as a starting point. And it's found in Mark 9 and Matthew 17. And it just says, Peter, James, and John, went up on a high mountain, and it says there Jesus was transfigured. The word here is metamorpho. He was metamorphosized before them. And he talks about his face shining like the sun, his clothes becoming dazzling white. I think the Gospel of Mark says it was, whiter than someone could bleach them. And so, and just, Moses and Elijah, they show up, and this is, even Peter is so amazed. He doesn't know what to do. He talks about putting up shelters, and then the voice of God comes. And so this is called the transfiguration, or the transformation of Jesus. But I would like to tell people that, of course, this is Jesus being transformed, but I'm sure we'd all agree that Peter, James, and John, I mean, they had to be transformed themselves. There's no way you could be in the presence of this transfigured Jesus and not yourself be transformed as well. And so the main thing here is that every time that we get into the presence of Jesus, and I'll bring this up a little bit later, but when we're in the presence of Jesus, transformation takes place in our life. Paul writes about us, not conforming to the pattern of the world, but being transformed by the renewing of our mind. At Hope, we're kind of pivoting a little bit and trying to get into some of the training of chapter servants, chapter leaders. Hopefully doing teaching and training that will transform our minds, that will allow us then to, as Paul writes here, to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice. Anytime we serve, we're given of our bodies and of our minds, and that will allow us to be transformed. And so you might say, well, what's the big deal about being transformed? Well, Paul also writes, as he's talking about Moses and the veil that he would put over his face, he says here that we would unveil faces, we reflect the Lord's glory. And we're being transformed into his likeness with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord. Ultimately, what we want as servants of hope and disciples of Jesus is for us as we live our lives to incrementally, the Bible says, with ever increasing glory, that we will begin to be transformed into the likeness of Jesus. So the goal is for us to become more Christ-like. And so what I would argue is that the way we become more Christ-like is by being in the presence of Jesus. And one of those ways in being in the presence of Jesus is, of course, the Word of God became flesh. So Jesus is the Word. So when we get into the Word, we're transformed. And as Paul says, we're transformed in our minds. But we're also transformed when we get into the presence of Jesus. It's like Peter, James, and John were there with Jesus. And all the other times disciples are with Jesus. We can't help but to be transformed. And so what does that look like for us as disciples and servants of hope? So now I'm going to shift. Now, hopefully, you understand kind of the idea of transformation. Every member engaged, every engagement that we do is transforming. Transforming how? Transforming each one of us more into the likeness of Jesus. And so, what I want to share is like, what does this mean for the church? And so, all of this, the next part I'm sharing here is really personal to me and really how I've tried to bring our Hope chapter in Atlanta and Bridgepoint Church in Atlanta and how we were able to come together and journey together and how I think about doing that. And so, what I'm going to do is just share with you a trajectory of discipleship that we find in the Gospels. And I'm going to focus on the Gospel of Matthew, but it's in Mark, Luke, and John as well, and show you how a church and a chapter can specifically move together and journey together and be purposeful and to do things that brings God's glory. So here's a picture of me. I have it sitting around my house. Is like one of my proudest moments in life. Actually, this past year, it was hard to believe that was 30 years ago. But this is, me graduating from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, and that was Colin Powell. He was actually the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, and he was our speaker at graduation. And so at West Point, you go there, you spend 4 years, you graduate, and then you have a 5-year commitment to the military. So they call it commissioning. You become a commissioned officer. And I remember about a year and a half after this, I think I sat down and started studying the Bible. And the person studying the Bible with me says, we're going to look at the Great Commission. And when they said that, it resonated because I had been a commissioned officer. And I go, there's a commissioning in the Bible. And he said, what's the Great Commission? Jesus doesn't call it that, but we find it in Matthew chapter 28, and we find it in Mark chapter 16, where Jesus took those he had trained and he commissioned them. Basically, a commission is a commission. So you are on mission with someone else, and Jesus basically said, you're on mission with me, and to go into all the world and to make disciples and to teach them and to baptize them. And he says, surely I'm going to be with you. So I just found that the Great Commission was really, really fascinating. And I will tell you, though, when I look at this picture, I'm still today, 30 years later, amazed at what transformed in my life over four years at the academy. I primarily went to West Point as an 18-year-old, uh, really with the hope of playing college football. That's why I chose to go there. I figured I didn't think about West Point like a lot of people did. I didn't do a lot of historical background check. I just thought it was a military academy. We'd put on a uniform and I get to play football and, get a great education. And when I got there, it was a wake up call. I showed up on July 1st, 1986. They called that our day. And they changed our life on day one. Like for the whole year, we could only say 4 things. Like you have 4 responses that you can say. They take away your language. They don't call you by your name. You are a plebe that is under the sophomores, juniors, seniors, and every other military personnel on there. You speak only when requested. You serve everybody. Uh, you do upper class laundry. You serve them food. This is for a whole year, and it's very humbling. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I made like day one. I thought I made a mistake. Maybe I can catch my parents before they head back to Virginia, because I got this all wrong. And I didn't care about the military. If you would have asked me about playing, sports, I was thought I might be in the NFL. I just was not thinking about the Army. And so on this day, though, 4 years later, almost 4 years later, when I'm shaking hands with Colin Powell, I had just chosen combat infantry, and it was doing Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And I had volunteered, like I went from not wanting to be in the military to right here standing and was like ready to go lead people into battle and to really give up my life. I was engaged and getting ready to get married. And my commander came to me and he says, well, when are you getting married? I said, I'm getting married in June of, 1991. He says, well, we're at war. He says, the one thing you might want to do is go ahead and get married right now. He says, because in the event that you die, um, at least your wife will be a widow and not a fiance, and she'll have benefits and things of that nature. And so I said, absolutely, that's what I'll do. So I think about what I was thinking here, and I go, what happened over that what transformed in me? And literally it was everything. And so I'm gonna briefly just show you this chart of what has worked for me in terms of just discipleship, and how I think we play a part in that with Hope Worldwide. Can everybody see this clearly? Okay. And so what I did was I just started with the Great Commission, and I kind of reverse engineered discipleship all the way back. And so if I call the Great Commission in Matthew 28, I go, they didn't start there. That was kind of like their commissioning and graduation. And so their beginning goes all the way back to Matthew chapter 4, and I just call that the great calling. And I know you guys probably remember that when Jesus comes and he calls them to be a disciple of Jesus, and he's calling them to something big, and he says, "Come and follow me. I'm going to make you fishers of men." And at once they dropped everything. And so for us, we know what that is. Somebody at some point reached out to us. We sat down to study the Bible. Someone called us to discipleship. We felt maybe that what Jesus was doing that for us, or God, or whatever the case may be, but we were called to do that. So I call that the great calling that we have, and that is to come follow Jesus. And then in Matthew chapter 5, Matthew chapter 6, and Matthew chapter 7, I call this the great curriculum. This is the Sermon on the Mount. This is Jesus comes in with his disciples. He sits down. He begins teaching them. And actually in verse 28 of chapter 7, it says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching. So we were called to be disciples. So we came in, and one of the first things we did, we sat down and we started studying. And maybe for some of us, it was called first principles. Maybe it's called foundational studies, or discipline. Anyway, we sat down and we started learning. And so I call this part the great, curriculum that we go through. And then next, if I'm following through the Gospel of Matthew, would be the greatest commandment. One time Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? There were like 600 and some Hebrew laws that were divided up. And so they're trying to trap Jesus. And Jesus says, really, Christianity is really simple. It's two things: love God, love neighbors yourself. Because all these other laws hang on these two. So we have this great commandment. So if we can just get, I love God and I love people. And then I call this the great compassion, Matthew chapter 25. And this is the lane where I fall in right now, pretty exclusively with Hope Worldwide. And this is the parable of the sheep and goats. And in this parable, Jesus talking about, I'm hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty. For the sake of time, I won't read it. I'm assuming all of you guys know what it is. But they responded to him. They said, well, when did we see you, a stranger, and invite you in our clothes? When did we see you sick? When did we see you? And Jesus, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. And if you recall, I talked about being transformed and being in the presence of Jesus. I think one of the ways that we are in the presence of Jesus is when we go out and we serve, when we serve the stranger, when we serve those who are sick, when we serve those who are in prison, when we, or even care about them or visit them, when people are hungry and thirsty, and we go do that, we really get the opportunity to encounter Jesus. And then, of course, I won't pay much attention to that, but go back to the Great Commission. So if we follow this trajectory, and I look back when I came to West Point and I graduated, I didn't show up the first day of West Point and then the very next day have Colin Powell commission me. There was no shortcuts, right? So I had to go through this process that got me there. And so the thing I think about, I'm trying to persuade and convince people all the time, and I did this with my own church, that Jesus, I don't think Jesus would have sent them on mission if they did not understand their calling, and if they did not understand the curriculum of their teaching. They had to get that. They had to understand where their heart was in terms of loving God and loving neighbor. I think Jesus says, I'm going to make sure you understand that. And then I think the great compassion. I think Jesus says, I'm going to make sure that you guys have a compassionate response in your heart to these demographics of people. And once you get that, then I think you'll be ready to go and do the Great Commission. And sometimes in churches, we may just call people to discipleship and then turn right around and say, go out and make some disciples, when in fact, they may not necessarily be prepared to do so. And so all the service that you all do in terms of hope is very important in the process of us making disciples of Jesus. And I can tell you, as a former church leader and a person who's been around a church leaders, a lot of times we can think that that is not important for every disciple in a church. We may think that hope is this side opportunity that we have over here, but what's really, really important is us focusing on disciple making. And what I would like to correct is, no, our service to the poor and the marginalized is a prerequisite of our disciple making. It is a very important part of preparing disciples to go and make disciples in other parts of the world. And we get to do that. I'll give you an example. I mentioned, just prison ministry before. Is, to me, I took we have our teen ministry at Bridgepoint Church. I took 22 young men, teenagers, to one of the high max prisons in the state of Georgia. And they were able to sit down with people who went to prison because of mistakes they made at their age. And we just sat there and talked to them. And every last one of those young boys was transformed by their encounter with inmates. We also do work in prison ministry for those who are family of incarcerated people. For example, spouses and children. It's amazing what happens. I served as a chaplain at the VA Medical Center, and my job was to go and visit soldiers in the Veterans Hospital, and not to go and convert people, but just to, sometimes I'd walk into a room and I didn't know if they were male or female. It was a last name and the last 4 digits of a person's social security number on the door, and I would walk in and either minister to people or just sit with people, sitting with people, holding their hand as they pass away or prepare for surgery. When Jesus says here, I was sick, you came to see me. And a lot of times in our churches, we go see sick people that we know, but sometimes we should just go see sick people that we don't know. Part of what we do in our church at Bridgepoint Church, we have a group of people that on a weekly basis go to a nursing home for the elderly because these people are lonely, and they just sit there and they play games and they just talk about the lives of people. And they're 85 years old. They help them reminisce about over their lives because nobody has visited them. And so Jesus says here, when I was sick, you came to see me. You came to visit me. And so when we do that, we are transforming the beneficiaries of our presence. But there's, just like being in the presence of Jesus, there is no way that we're not also transformed when we spend time serving and loving people. So that's kind of my message. How do we? So once someone said to you, "Okay, I understand the BHAG, every member engaged, every engagement transforming into what? The likeness of Christ. How do we go about doing that? By serving other people. We are Jesus. We're being transformed in the presence of Jesus because Jesus is there as the stranger. Jesus is there as the sick person. Jesus is there as the poor person. Jesus is there as those who are hungry and thirsty. He embodies those people, and we are in the presence of Jesus, and thus are transformed. So that's the process. I've shared that with a few churches. It has worked for me. I would say it's a trajectory, but it really is not. There is a weaving of these things that go back and forth, and I think what churches leaders have appreciated is that we're not abandoning the fact that we need to be missional and make disciples. I'm just trying to say that we do those simultaneously. We make disciples, and part of making disciples is us being disciples who are compassionate and who love other people. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop here. I do appreciate your time. Open up for any Q&A, questions that you may have for as long as we need to go.